So I want to touch briefly, before we look over your little practice problem, I want to touch on the, well, it's kind of one and the same because your practice problem had that American Opportunity Credit in it, didn't it? I told you I'd get you those printouts. So you've got the printout that shows you the eligibility. Everybody get that one? AOC, it looks like that. It shows you the eligibility and how the credit refundable versus non-refundable looks. And then the phase-out amounts. When your credit's reduced, that just means the amount you're allowed goes down. So in the past, you couldn't get it if it was like over 100,000 or 125,000. It was a little bit lower than it is now. Now you can actually get it all the way up to like 160. So that's been raised some. The back is what shows you the percentage. AOC credit is 60% non-refundable, 40% refundable. If it faded out, no, I rewrote it before she copied it, so you should be able to see. It just didn't print out right on there for some reason. 40% refundable. So what that means is, what I used to call it was above the line, but the lines don't exist anymore the way they did the new 1040. But 60% can go directly to that tax liability. The other can be down in the refundable section. Okay? So who this actually helps as well, because you get the first $2,000 outright to you. Before, it just used to be a percentage. So it actually helps the one that don't spend as much, but they get 100% of the first $2,000 of the credit. So if you only spend $500 or $600, if everything else goes good for you in the return, you get the full amount of what you spend for that first $2,000. So it does help more people who don't spend as much. Does that make sense? Because you get more of that credit up front back. And page 79, it's kind of towards the back there. It's just telling you this is for ones that have completed those first 4 years. So that AOC credit, that bigger credit for education, is that first 4 years. Okay. You were enrolled in a degree, certificate, or other recognized program. So usually those programs are going to give you that 1098T. Okay. Do you have a question?
Why 4 years?
That's bachelor's. So you can't use it after the 4 years.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's more meaning for like a bachelor's, associates or bachelor's. Okay. Yeah. After the 4 years, it moves on to the other credit that I did not print out at all, called the Lifetime Learner, but it's on that sheet, that double-sided credit sheet. You will see that on there. We just don't see it as much. That's going to be for like graduate students.
Okay.
Like those that are continuing their learning, they just don't get to claim as much. Similar when you put it in the software, almost exactly the same paperwork, but they just don't get to claim as much of the credit. Okay? And student was taking at least one half the normal full-time, just half. They have to be at least part-time. Okay. And that will all be marked on that 1098. Like I said, I gave y'all a 1098 last week, or did we not meet for that session for the 1098T?
I don't think we got it.
Okay, they may have over there. But there may be one on your practice. Do you have one in your practice for that practice problem? See if there's a 1098T so we can look at that real quick. Because I think there was one in your practice, an education credit, so there should have been a 1098 unless it just gave you the numbers, which that sometimes happens too in that when they give out practice, it may just tell you the amounts. They may have not given you the 1098T.
Sisters did not receive the 1098T.
On the practice?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go ahead and, I've got a list started for next week.
Yeah, she didn't get it.
Okay, I've got a list started of what to bring in. Oh, I did that one, but then I found something on the other one that I could use over there, so 1098T and a 1099C.
But it gave us some other stuff.
Okay, yeah, so I need to bring in the 1098T. Okay, so I've got that down. All right, so yeah, I will bring one next week so you can see those and kind of see how that works, what's on there. What I will tell you is on your homework, you'll notice there's a couple of pages with it says, AOC at the top where it's those forms that it's working through how to computate the credits. That's not how it will look like to you guys. For y'all, it'll have your one screen or whatever. You'll either enter the 1098 information. They're not calling me to tell me anything. They're just calling me about a survey. I knew that was the doctor's number, but they keep calling me about surveys. Sorry, guys. I'm like, I don't want to hear about your surveys. I need medical information. Now, where was I? In your packets, I printed it off because it shows you a lot of the information. But if you turn to it, the ones that's titled AOTC or American Opportunity Credit, the actual forms for the credit, it's real like small lettering and looks really confusing. And it's on your practice problem.
Oh,
Yeah, in your little packet with your practice from last week.
oh, chapter.
Yeah. You'll notice if you look through in the information that's auto put, because that's your answer. You know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, you mean on the 1040?
1098.
Yeah, in that whole packet. It'll be behind the 10. Well, it's with the 1040. It shows the forms for the American Opportunity Credit. Yes, that one. What's that say at the top?
No, that's education. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah, sorry, same difference. Yeah, and then they call it. What's it say at the very top? The name of that form?
Education credit?
Yes, education credits. So that form is a little daunting. You won't see that when you're doing them in the software. You literally will just either have like a hub page that'll say education credits, and you'll start typing in your stuff. You're not going to see that craziness right there, calculations and all that. Yeah. I just wanted you to have it in case it asks you on the competency, like what line is blah, 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 or what form is blah, blah, blah. So you have it showing one worked so you can refer back to it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because as you notice, it's a 60-40 split. It can only be up to 2,000. It's going to be pretty cut and dry how to even out the credit. But that'll give you help even on your competency test. If they give you a little scenario, you can follow those lines and know how to calculate it for your competency, okay? But in our realm, like I said, they did it different the past few years, but usually it's like a little portal. It'll take you to this whole little section for education, and you'll enter in like the university information. You'll enter in all your different, you don't have a 1090 in front of you, but it'll have you put in the information from the school, all that kind of thing. I showed them one from somewhere. I know I did. Yep, it was in here. See, I forget about my old guide that I used to use from a year ago. I just forget that I have it. So let me find it. I don't purposefully do that, but I just kind of forget because I've slept since then. And they do them differently now. And then my guide even is different because this is my actual. What do they call that? No, that's volume 2. That's not my instructor book. I thought that looked different. It's like everything you guys are doing now used to be in our second book. I may not even have the 1098 in the second book. But I can go find it. Yeah, it's in the first book. Let me see if I got one in here. I hate not to
Thanks.
really show it to you.
Thanks.
But that's one of those that hasn't changed in a few years. So, and I gotta go back all the way to 2013 because my books have ran out. That's the rabbit books are awesome. But I don't have many left because they walk away because they're so cool. So cool. Okay, 298. I should use this to print it. Sheesh, please.
You said it's a
1098
Do you
T.
have that one? We don't have that one.
I don't think so. I know I showed it to the other class. So I'm wondering if somehow I printed it out for them and just didn't get it printed for y'all. Because I swear, I know I remember going through it with them. And why can I not find it? It's like it's just like run away. Run away, run away. I changed the credits that year. Is there an appendix? Please have an appendix. Okay, well this is just ridiculous. I do not know why I cannot find a 1098 anywhere to save my life. Literally find everything else. Mercy sakes, I know we go over them.
Just double checking, we're not meeting tomorrow, right?
Correct. We are not meeting tomorrow. We'll meet next.
Just looking for one, what one looks like.
Yeah. If you just want to show them on there. But it'll have your institutional name. It'll have, I mean, maybe you had a different chapter. Did you find one in one of the handouts?
With the W-2s. It's gonna look like a 1099 almost.
Yeah.
Good.
That's not it.
No, that's a W-2.
No. I'll be sure and bring one in.
No,
But
1098. Yeah, okay, yeah.
is it on there, on the
Yeah.
bottom one?
Mhm.
It just looks funny because it's just a small one.
W2.
Is that what
Yes.
it looked like?
It's on
Yes,
there.
and it is on there. What's the page on the bottom? 9. It's on 9 of that homework.
At the
Very bottom.
of the mom's
See,
W2.
yet again, another complaint on their spreadsheets. It's like, don't try to combine them to save pages. It looks like one whole thing. They have to hard time reading it.
It looked like a W2.
It looks like, yeah, they all, and that is the perfect example of when you have to be careful when you're sorting. Remember when I said they bring them in, and we'll learn more about that when I show you how to actually do returns, like the process we go through, is that's why it's good to put all your actual W-2s together and put all your other forms out beside each other, so you literally can say, I've got 3 W-2s for Mrs. Smith, 2 W-2s for Mr. Smith, and then we've got these extra forms here we'll get to. That way, you know you've got W-2s first, they're done and out of the way, and you get to all the extra stuff. Because the most issues you're going to run into is all that extra stuff. Kind of the, I don't want to say miscellaneous, because there's miscellaneous forms, right? But just all the extras. You know, I'm like, just do the simple ones first that you know are probably correct, and you can pop in real quick, and then deal with all the other junk that comes along. Because sometimes those things you'll need to do follow-up information, or there might be something they don't know that you need to put in. But the 1098T, will you let me see that one so I can talk about it real quick? So basically it's got the payments received, okay? It's got scholarships or grants, adjustments made to a prior year. At the bottom, it's got check if half part-time. Some of those other boxes we don't see very often, so I'm not as good at knowing what some of those miscellaneous ones are. The biggest one you want to look out for is the scholarships and grants. If that's ever more than what was billed, they have an overage, which means if we put that in there, they're going to be taxed on it. Now, legally, they're supposed to be. Technically, I've had a lot of them say, well, I don't even want to try for that credit then, and so I marked the packet. I'm like, oh, well, but the IRS could always come back and say, no, you got to file that, you know. So I mean, if they get a lot of grants and we think they had a big overage, I wouldn't let them do it. But if it was close, I might keep it off and let them, you know, flip the dice. But if it's a lot of extra grant money beside what was billed, that means they got a good chunk of change back somehow. You know, we might want to go ahead and put it on the return. Just makes it a little different how you actually file it in the return. The software is going to make you maybe go some places and put some extra things in there to say that they have taxable income off of it. Box 4 says adjustments made for a prior year. In past years, if there was an adjustment for a prior year, it was kind of a tedious thing to calculate. So sometimes we would not even do the adjustment because it was so tedious. We'd have to get the prior year return. We'd have to manually do some things. And it just, it's a political policy. It just would be too crazy to try to figure it. The older software we had was easier to do it. So I've done a few. But this last year, the newer software, even corporate was like telling us how to do it, but not how to do it, you know, technically. And it was just fine. The lady's like, you know, because it wasn't, yet again, that much of an adjustment. Just leave it off. So hopefully the newer software will be easier for us to do the adjustment. Because on those types of things, what's going to happen is the IRS may eventually catch it and they'll bill them. So I always CYA and mark the packet. We had that extra education thing on there. We couldn't get it figured out. They wanted it just to put through anyway. Client says no biggie. We'll deal with it when it comes. That way we know and we remember, because that could be a year or two later, you know, that comes up, and we want to make sure we have it on the packet what the deal was. So that's about all on the education credit. Something else, though, that there's a lot of questions, and I think they even put them on that page I was telling you to look at with just the form of the education credit on the answer for the homework. the actual IRS form. I don't know if they list it in there, but there's questions about, were you a felon? Had you completed your first 4 years of schooling? Things like that. There will be a whole host of yes or no questions and things you have to type along with that credit. You just ask the client. It's not anything you're going to know. You have to ask them. You'll realize that as we go along, there's a lot of credits that they have to kind of give us information. It's not as simple as the W-2 that we know everything by what we see. So that in turn means communication, follow-up, keeping up with the client and what they're telling us, what they're not telling us. So, always if you're in and out of a return, multiple times, document what you added, what you changed, what you took off. Always document that on the back of the packet. If there's a way this year to document it in the new software, you'd want to document it in there. Because if Gustavo came to pick up a packet Samantha's been working on, say Samantha got sick, she's been out for a week, you want to come finish her up, somebody may come in that's been working with Samantha and they already gave her stuff. She put it in, but we don't know that she put it in, and we're not sure. Maybe she was sick, so she forgot to put it in, and they think it's there and they think they're done. So that communication is very important. Because like I said, some of these credits require follow-up. Sometimes they've got to bring us in extra stuff, especially if things get put in what's called our hold box or a hold area. We write it on the back of the packets, and if there's a place this year in the software, we put it in the software. A couple of softwares ago, there wasn't a really good place to put notes in the computer, so we lived and died by the packet. I still live and die by it. I still think it's that first touch that you see, but typing, at least as a secondary, get it in there. Maybe it'll be easier this year. Anytime you have to put it on hold, it will ask you a reason, but if it doesn't have a place to type, it's pointless. And we could never figure out where it rolled it to, so if you put it in there on hold, we could never see where those notes went to actually see it. That's why we always use the packet. So, that being said, the actual practice problem with that education page and everything on there, did you have any questions when y'all were looking through it to actually get your amounts? I know they figure it for you, but as far as top to bottom on that 1040 and those schedules and just how they come up with it, I think they were asking me about that other dependent credit. I think that's the one. It's like $500. I think that was the same problem there. They got a $500. That's a set amount. So if you look on that front and back chart with all the credits, that other dependent credit, that $500 doesn't change. You get it or you don't. That's unlike the child tax credits and the additional child tax credits and the EIC, which can depend on your income, which tax liability is, all of that. That $500 is non-refundable, but I think you get it and you use it or you get nothing. So they're either another dependent or they're not. Does that make sense? That's just a little extra credit this last year that was brought in with the tax code to kind of say, here's $500 just for the heck of it. They were in your house. Literally, that's what it is. So yeah, that's what that was. Okay, so moving on. Let me see what I want to do next. Let's do gambling winnings. That's a whole fun little spiel. I think Cindy and BJ got lost in there. Okay. Gambling winnings, okay, looks like this. Includes, but is not limited to, winnings from lotteries, raffles, horse and dog races, casinos, as well as fair market value of prizes such as cars, houses, trips, other non-cash prizes. Raffle tickets are not charitable donations, even if the check is made payable to the school or church. Okay? This is just telling you losses are allowed to be deducted from line 21 of Schedule 1. No losses are allowed to be deducted from line 21 of Schedule 1. The losses for the year reported and deducted as other miscellaneous deductions on Schedule A. The amount deducted cannot be more than the amount of winnings. So that's very important. If you want to star that, the amount you can deduct cannot be more than your amount of winnings. Do we have any gamblers in here that go to the casino? No? Okay. So this is what happens at the casino. So we don't see a lot of them in here as much because this is further away from the Oklahoma state line. But over there we see a lot of them in Salon. So it's a W-2G. And I don't know if I did again. Yeah, you do have one in there.
I think we talked about this.
Yeah. So I think we touched on it on some other sections in the training, that this is the actual section that talks about it. The biggest things I want you to know is, if you'll turn to that next page, go ahead and italic or star that you can only deduct more than you win. But let's talk about it first, then we'll talk about the deduction. So, mandatory withholdings if it's $5,000 or more. That means if you go to a casino and you jackpot $5,000 or more, they're supposed to, okay, this is more than $5,000, sorry, of more than $5,000, they're supposed to automatically take taxes out for you. What do you think most people do that it's less than that? Sometimes they don't request taxes taken out. And then what do you think happens at tax time? They're in for a rude awakening when they come in and there's no taxes taken out of a $4,000 jackpot. Okay? Because you also have state taxes too. So if you receive 600 more winnings, the payer is required to issue you a W-2G. So there's one thing where they're supposed to issue you a form. There's another that you have to take out taxes, right? So they're always really supposed to issue you a form. Okay? This is the form right here. So when they say you can only count your losses up to your winnings, if you look at that, that was $8,555 in the winnings section. That means you can deduct up to that amount in a certain spot in your tax return to try to relieve some of those taxes. Now, unfortunately, it's not a straight deduction. It's going to go on that itemized page we're going to talk about later. So you may or may not even be able to use it. Because your itemized thing, when we get to it, that's one of those where there's that choice. You either do the standard or the itemized that goes above the standard. So what happens is people will come in thinking, oh, I get to use my gambling losses. Well, no, you get to use up to what you won. And then even then, it may not matter if you can't itemize. So then they get really upset about it. But that's just the way it is. Now, the paperwork requirement on this, casinos can issue you a win-loss statement that shows you how much you actually lost to prove this. It will only do it if you have a player's card, which is like kind of like a membership type thing. We can use receipts to tell us that you use this, but the thing is, the player's card actually shows your punches. So say you had it racked up past 8,000, but then you spent, you had it racked up to 15, right? But then you spent 7. Well, we don't know that by looking at this, that you spent 7, because you had it inside the machine, right? So it is better if they have some kind of documentation. This is not one of those things, if it's probably about 10,000 or less, that I make them prove. We had a big one come in. I told her just to do it. It's the off season. I'm not going to argue about it with someone. But we usually do make it clear, okay, Mr. Customer, if you're saying you had a jackpot of $20,000 and you want them to say you can use that deduction up to $20,000, they could audit you and make you prove those receipts, and that's on you. And where do we put that? We mark the back of the packet. We say, hey, we had this conversation with the client. They said they could produce some receipts or ATM receipts or something that showed, because they took something into the casino to play with, right? But they could have jackpotted over, but it's not when they cashed out. And I'm not aficionado on which point it records it in the machine and all that. But I just know that sometimes you may not put in as much as you win, but you could have racked it up and then played it back down, okay? So I don't get in the mood to tell them that. I have another lady one year that spent like 60 or 80,000. She won like 60 or 80,000. I said, you need to bring me documents. I'm not doing that. And I think she bought me like 40 or 50 in receipts. So, but yeah, so there could be, but no, we don't see that many. So if it's a small enough amount, I don't worry about it. And also on that, so if you're in the state of Arkansas and the casino's in Oklahoma, technically you would have income from Oklahoma. But as a rule of thumb, a lot of times the casinos don't put the ID numbers for the state on there. So if it's a few $1,000s, sometimes I tell the client, here's the deal. You don't have any other Oklahoma income. Let's not worry about that few extra $1,000. That's probably under the limit for what you need to file anyway in that state. And I'd mark the packet that I'm telling them this. If they really wanted us to go try to scrounge up whatever casino it is and get that ID number, we can try. If we can't find it, it's their job technically. And so if we can't get it, we can't e-file it to do the state portion for that to count. So it's one of those things. I also would only go out on a limb if they withheld state. So then you might want to do it because if they had money withheld out on state, like they held it out because they got that over 5,000, they would not hold out state. So that's when you want to go hunt down that state withholding. Did that one today go? Did it have state or no?
The big one?
Yeah. State withholding, do you remember? It didn't, yeah, so they did
Federal.
federal. Because federal's fine, we could always do it on federal, but it didn't have the state, so we're gonna have to figure
That was
out,
the only one that was.
yeah. Now, in this case, in this person now, we're paper filing anyway, so the EIN doesn't matter. We can override it in the system and just print it out. So since she's owing and she didn't withhold, we
No,
can.
They did actually put their filer's identification.
They did. Oh, they did on that one. Yeah. But if they wouldn't have, we were going to paper file because it's past the time anyway, so it wouldn't matter. It only matters for e-file. Okay. And if it's on there, the only way they'll give it back to them or reconcile it is if we have that EIN and if it's reported. So if it's one of those that's smaller and say we don't want to mess with the state portion of it, that's what I usually tell them. Because even to file another state would be $50 to $75. Well, at a 10% rate, you'd have to make a few thousand for that to even pay for your filing. I mean, you're going to pay us more than what you'd owe the state, so it's that catch and take, right? And so that's why I don't usually stress if it's just a few thousand. If it's over a few thousand, we definitely want to make sure we file that state return for them. It just may be a roundabout way we have to go about it. Any general questions on gambling winnings per se? You mainly need to know it's that W2G. Actual G. W2G, not to be confused with the other G's that are government, because they're super close and it's super easy to. And then if you're like us, we don't get as many over here, so it's kind of like, oh, what is that again?
Yeah, I think it was the first one I talked
Done
about.
in a
Actually,
while.
WG.
Yeah, in a while, if at all, because I don't remember you ever talking to me about it, so it probably was just random ones that have come. Because I don't see them a lot over here. Yeah,
But not.
but I
just
don't
not that
see them a lot over here. I just don't. It's like people from Fayetteville just don't go to Salon or something. Really.
What is it? Indigo Sky, which I
Yeah,
believe
which is
up
Indigo
there.
Sky, which is I think up north. Is that more northern?
Wyandotte?
Indigo Sky,
Seneca.
Wyandotte, Seneca. It's up on that little 3 or 4 corners up there. So it's a little further north. But and that lady's from Bentonville, so that's why she probably knows.
We went there with your dad, and they weren't open.
That's
We
right.
actually walked into the casino, and they were doing a dry run. They're like, "Sorry, we're not open."
We're like, oh, we were gonna come. That was a few years back. We
We'll
were
be
gonna
your
like,
guinea pigs.
yeah, we were gonna like. Can you give me a time check, babe?
Yes, it is 7:16.
Okay.
So
All right.
Water town.
Yeah. Okay, so other income. This one is just kind of a smorgasbord, and then there's key ideas on the back. Other income, really the only one I want you to kind of notice on that one. It's talking about debt that you owe that can be forgiven. Have any of you ever, not that you want to admit it, but have any of you ever heard of settling with a credit card company, getting them to wipe out debt, something like that? So there is something called a 1099-C, okay? Hence, cancellation of debt for C. That is taxable. So if someone brought, and a lot of times the client doesn't know what they are. Like they might remember when you start talking about it, but they don't know what it is. They're like, what's this? You are taxed if you cancel debt on a credit card or what have you, took the note lot, a car, what have you. Say you had a Visa card and you had them wipe out $5,000 worth of your debt. Well, you're going to be taxed on that as income. So at a 10% tax rate, that's about $500-600 for federal, plus your state side. So a lot of people are surprised when they come in and they've got that and they're like, oh, I'm taxed on that? Yes, you are. Because a lot of times they don't tell them or they forget. Every now and then, they will have questions. Like the system will have questions of, are they in a bankruptcy? Are they insolvent? Are they able to pay this debt? And we have to just ask the client. Now, if it was a large amount of debt and there was a question about whether the client was in bankruptcy or had some kind of financial issues, that's where with some of the new stuff that's rolling out, we'd want to look more closely at that client to see if we could help them in different ways, as well as if they're going to owe a lot to the IRS. There are resolution things we can do. So we want to hit that up then and see if we need to go ahead and file everything or wait and figure out resolution before we file. So you would know if it's that situation. If it's just somebody that has $1,000 wiping away of a random credit card and they say they don't have any other debt, that's probably not that situation. But if there was things that were marked on their form that said bankruptcy or something like that, then we may need to see if there's some kind of special rule where they don't have to claim it or something in that situation. So always, when in doubt, ask. If you get something special and you're not sure, always ask one of us. Because if we don't know the answer, we can definitely figure it out. Another option this year with our new AI, artificial intelligence, or our chat tickets, is they might be more easily available inside of the return depending on the situation. So it could be you could do a chat right then and they could be answering it while you're finishing the return. So that's another option on quick questions if you weren't sure. Any questions on that? Like I said, and even says at the bottom, maybe I'd exclude the debt if you're considered insolvent, but there's a lot of different things that goes along with that, and I would want to look more into that to figure that out. Like I said, guys, there's 2 or 3 things there that has the key ideas from that previous chapter. I'll let you read through those at your leisure. Let me, I'm looking for my one that I was going to keep. I had it somewhere.
American Opportunity?
No, the itemized.
Oh, this one.
It's not there. Here it is. I've got it. Sandy. Thought I had it all in my stack here. I'll probably find it in there. Thought I had it. Sorry. Who knows? Maybe I tossed it.
We'll need some copies.
No, I've got one.
Oh,
I just had is that an extra? Is that yours right there?
this on mine. This right here is.
No, the other. I literally just had it literally in my hand.
I did not.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Remember, I have the whole deck.
Oh, at the house.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, honey.
I have the whole deck right here.
I don't know what you mean.
You down?
Oh, because that's your laptop. Sorry, babe. And it connects to the